Good afternoon, everybody. This is Jeff J. Brown, China Rising Radio Sinoland in Chiang Mai, Thailand. And before we get started, please click on the fundraiser button above and below, or use the PayPal instructions above and below. YouTube and SoundCloud have the same information in the descriptions. Every one of these podcasts and articles that I do take me many hours. I'm just trying to make minimum wage in the United States, which is $7.25 an hour, and I'm not even making that. So please support China Rising Radio Sinoland and all of my research, writing, and reporting. Today's article is entitled, Godfree Roberts Shares His SARS-CoV-2 Timeline. There is a 99% chance it should be called the Yankee coronavirus. Pictured above, military world game powerhouse United States got a laughably pathetic 35th place in Wuhan, China, November 2019, just 2 weeks before SARS-CoV-2 began propagating there. It sure looks like America's soy sauce soldiers were there for something besides athletics and winning medals. Here we go. As has been reported here before, there is almost a 100% chance SARS-CoV-2 started in the United States during the summer of 2019, and it was caught or hand-carried by some of the 326 U.S. soldiers who went to Wuhan, China in November 2019 for the Military World Games, accidentally or intentionally spread it in their hotel in the nearby local markets, causing the outbreak in China 2 weeks later. I'm leaning towards intentional biowarfare for several reasons. First, the United States has a very long and continual history of using biochemical and nuclear weapons on its own people and perceived enemies. As I researched and explained in detail in the China trilogy. Secondly, the U.S. team at the Military World Games in Wuhan was the laughingstock of the world. These games are taken just as seriously every 4 years as the Olympics. Historically, like the latter, it has always been a battle royale between the U.S., China, and Russia. In Wuhan, China and Russia came out on top. How well did the U.S. team do? It placed 35th out of 66 teams behind Finland, Tunisia, and Namibia with 0 gold medals. They were such a joke that Chinese social media mocked them as soy sauce soldiers. This strongly suggests that the team sent to China was not full of real athletes, but bioweapon field agents to spread coronavirus around Wuhan. The fact that their hotel, the Wuhan Oriental, is only 300 meters away from Wuhan's supposed, quote, ground zero wet market, where the soldiers did daily shopping, is also highly suspect. Not to mention that the first 42 Chinese diagnosed with SARS-CoV-2 were all employees there. The American team's hotel was actually the ground zero and spread from there. I wonder. Actually, I don't. I think it is beyond obvious. The preponderance of evidence would convict the United States of crimes against humanity for the SARS-CoV-2 epidemic starting in China. Third, from the very beginning, China treated the infection like an act of war and still does. China's biolabs analyzed the genetic makeup of SARS-CoV-2 first, and of course knew that Harvard collected massive amounts of ethnic Chinese DNA samples during the 10 years before the first SARS, 2002-2003. Fourth, you have to live in a cave to not know that the United States has been trying to destroy communist socialist China since Mao Zedong gave global capitalists and Western imperialists the boot in 1949. The United States blatantly attacked China and North Korea with bioweapons during the Korean War and continues to use biochemical and nuclear weapons around the world. Evil stars align perfectly on the geopolitical map to use Wuhan as a bioweapon theater of attack. But if the United States did not do it intentionally, then it was the U.S. team in Wuhan that spread SARS coronavirus 2 there unknowingly. All evidence points to SARS coronavirus 2 starting in the United States in the summer of 2019 and very likely was released as a germ warfare test or accidentally leaked out of Fort Detrick, the U.S.'s largest bioweapon laboratory in Maryland. The fact that Uncle Sam's soy sauce soldiers trained at Fort Belvoir, just a 15-minute drive from Fort Detrick, is significant. This is all spelled out in detail by Godfree Roberts in his excellent timeline article. Below, it is presented in bullet form through April 2nd, 2020, today. Before moving on, if you have not listened to my interviews with Godfree as a guest on China Rising Radio Sinoland, you are missing out on some great discussion and analysis, which continue to be fresh and topical to today's headlines. Why Donald Trump and Xi Jinping are still the U.S. and Chinese presidents, respectively, and the last 6 of our chats revolve around these two leaders vying on the world stage. The first 2 compare the educational systems between Yurangland and China, which is fascinating and revealing. All right, this is the COVID-19 timeline as of April 2nd, 2020 by Godfree Roberts. It starts in September 2008. Though the first causes of H1N1 swine flu were reported in California and Texas in March 2009, genetic analysis suggests that it began 6 months earlier. This is significant because the CDC now admits that early COVID-19 cases went undetected. May 28, 2015, more than 200 U.S. biosafety Level 3 and Level 4 labs working with dangerous pathogens, and they keep their safety records secret. Fort Detrick, Virginia is one of 12 in that state alone. May 16, 2018, the White House fires the entire U.S. pandemic response team. May 2nd, some of these are a little bit out of order. May 2nd, 2019, the Chemical and Biological Defense Unit of U.S. Defense, Fort Detrick, Virginia, announced its bid to develop SARS and MERS virus inhibitors. June 14, 2019, the CDC finds U.S. Institute of Infectious Diseases at Fort Detrick, Virginia, non-compliant with its pathogen control agreement. June 30th, 2019, unidentified pneumonia in Springfield, Virginia nursing home near Fort Detrick, Virginia, 15 minutes from Fort Belvoir, Virginia, where the U.S. team trained for Wuhan military games. July 9th, 2019, the White House withdraws its only U.S. epidemiologist embedded with China's CDC, Center for Disease Control. Why? July 9th, 2019, report of vape pneumonia 100 kilometers southeast of Fort Detrick, Virginia. The lung images show the COVID-19 ground glass shadow. Still unexplained. July 12, 2019, respiratory outbreak at Springfield, Virginia assist care facility near Fort Detrick, kills 2, sickens 54. A third patient dies 4 days later. Deaths remain unexplained to this day. July 14, 2019, a Chinese researcher is escorted from infectious disease lab amid Royal Canadian Mounted Police (RCMP) investigation. Public Health Agency of Canada describes it as a possible, quote, policy breach, end of quote, no risk to Canadian public. Did she discover the COVID-19 outbreak? July 17, 2019, a pneumonia epidemic report reported at a nursing home in Burke, Virginia, 56 minutes from Fort Detrick, Virginia. It remains unexplained to this day. July 26, the Virginia State Health Bureau takes measures to prevent the spread of this pneumonia epidemic, including stopping collective activities, screening residents, and extra cleanliness. August 6, 2019, the CDC shuts down America's main biological warfare lab at Fort Detrick, Virginia, an unheard of civilian intervention in military affairs. A senior scientist described the atmosphere there as one of, quote, fear and mistrust, end of quote. The CDC refuses to provide details. August 26, 2019, the Virginia Department of Health confirms 3 cases of severe lung illness associated with the use of e-cigarettes known as vaping. September 2019, a nationwide outbreak of a mysterious pneumonia causes severe respiratory problems in hundreds of people. It kills 54. So-called vaping-associated lung disease shares same symptoms as COVID-19, and images invariably show the same bilateral ground glass opacities. October 18th. He's a little bit out of order here. I need to go back. August 5th, media widely reports that the CDC's closure of Fort Detrick, Virginia was for national security. August 19th, CDC expands patient detection system with the same symptoms as existing patients. September 14th to October 10th, the U.S. military team trains for military World Games at Fort Belvoir near Fort Detrick, Virginia. And then back to October 18th, 2019, the deputy director of the CIA participated in a Johns Hopkins World Economic Forum, WEF, and the Gates Foundation hosted a pandemic tabletop exercise codenamed Event 201, modeling a fictional coronavirus pandemic. Now, November 2019, coronavirus identified in Italy after laboratory tests isolated a strain of the virus from an Italian patient with genetic differences from the original strain isolated in China. Massimo Galli, professor of infectious diseases at the University of Milan, said, very strange pneumonias circulated in Europe as early as November of last year. That would have been 2018, a year before that. December 5th, 2019, a Chinese medical researcher is arrested in Boston trying to take biological samples back to China. Zhang Zhaosong of Beth Israel Deaconess Medical Center confessed to taking material from a lab in Boston. FBI specialist Agent Kara Spice found 21 wrapped vials containing a, quote, brown liquid, end of quote, that appeared to be, quote, biological material, end of quote. Samples of post-mortem lung tissue looks like brown liquid. Zhang's roommate, also a researcher, told FBI agents that 2 lab mates of Zhang had succeeded in getting specimens to China. China presumably now went on high alert. December 27, 2019, Dr. Zhang Jixian, ICU doctor at Hubei Hospital, that's where Wuhan is, the province Hubei, reports to Wuhan Municipal Health Commission on pneumonia patients with an unknown cause. December 28, 2019, 3 more patients arrive at the hospital, all related to Huanan Seafood Market. December 30th, 2019, Wuhan Municipal Health Committee issues notice of an unknown viral illness. December 31st, 2019, Beijing receives virus genome results, informs WHO, World Health Organization, of Wuhan pneumonia with unknown cause. Wuhan announces virus on CCTV and CGTN. Those are the 2 big Chinese TV media platforms. We are now into the new year, January 1st, 2020. Chinese Center for Disease Control researchers publish an article on the suspected outbreak, seafood market shut down. January 3rd, 2020, CDC first learns of coronavirus from Chinese colleagues, according to Health and Human Services, that's abbreviated HHS, Director Alex Azar. Also January 3rd, 2020, China reports 44 suspected patients with the mystery pneumonia. National Health Commission classifies it as highly pathogenic, orders all labs without high pathogen licenses to destroy or transfer samples to secure labs. January 9th, Chinese labs confirm the existence of the new virus, begin genetic sequencing. China reports the death of a 61-year-old male in Wuhan with severely underlying medical conditions. January 9th, also, Chinese officials announced coronavirus outbreak with 44 confirmed cases. January 11th, 2020, China uploads the genetic sequence of the novel coronavirus to an international database, but it was unclear how serious this was or if serious action should be taken. Winter, flu, and pneumonia are common, but discerning a novel, serious outbreak is no simple matter. January 15th, 2020, Oxford University's Evolutionary Ecology of Infectious Disease Group says COVID-19 reached the UK no later than mid-January and may have infected half the population by March 21st. January 18th of this year, U.S. HHS runs a 6-month, quote, Crimson Contagion, end of quote, scenario of a respiratory virus pandemic that begins in China and quickly spreads around the world. January 21st, 2020, WHO confirms human-to-human transmission of the virus. January 23rd, 2020, complete cordon sanitaire, which is where you shut a city down. It's not really a quarantine, around Wuhan. January 24th, Slate op-ed by the New American Foundation proclaims, quote, many of China's actions to date are overly aggressive and ineffective in quelling the outbreak, end of quote. The Los Angeles Times calls President Xi's efforts to rally the country, quote, shoddy propaganda, end of quote. The Economist depicts China as an authoritarian plague, threatening the world more than any pandemic. January 28th, the first confirmed coronavirus case at a Seattle clinic. Seattle's in Washington State in the United States. January 29th, WHO rejects accusations that China was responsible for the global spread of COVID-19. Director General Dr. Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus says China's actions actually helped prevent the spread of coronavirus to other countries. January 30th, U.S. state and federal officials refused permission for Dr. Chu, University of Washington infectious disease expert, permission to use ongoing flu tests to monitor for coronaviruses. February 3rd, U.S. CDC refuses to adopt a WHO test and ships 200 test kits. February 15th, CDC announces that its tests were flawed and recalls them. February 16th to the 24th of this year, said the WHO's Chief Executive Director for Health Emergencies, Michael Ryan of Ireland, quote, I have never seen the scale and commitment of an epidemic response at this level in terms all of government. The challenge is great, but the response has been massive, and the Chinese government deserves huge credit for that response and for the transparency in which they have dealt with this, end of quote. February 25th, 2020, without government approval, Dr. Helen Chu and University of Washington colleagues begin coronavirus testing and get an immediate positive COVID-19 result. By then, the virus has contributed to the deaths of 2 people and would kill 20 more in the Seattle region over the following days. March 3rd, 2020, CDC announces it will distribute diagnostic test kits to test 75,000 people by March 17th. The CDC decided not to adopt a test approved by the World Health Organization and instead forged ahead with its own test. March 9th, 2020, HHS staffers often weren't informed about coronavirus developments because they didn't have adequate clearance. Someone at HHS said was told that the matters were classified because it had to do with China, end of quote. March 11th, 2020, White House classifies all coronavirus deliberations and shifts HHS meetings to a secure area called a, quote, sensitive compartmentalized information facility, or SCIF, usually reserved for intelligence and military operations during biowarfare or chemical attacks. March 11th, 2020, U.S. announces it has tested 5,000 people suspected of coronavirus 19 infection. Also March 11th, White House fires the National Security Council Pandemic Response Directorate, We worked very well with that office, Dr. Anthony Fauci, director of the NIH, National Institute of Health, Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases, told Congress. It would be nice if the office was still there. March 12, 2020, CDC Director Dr. Robert Redfield testifies to Congress that some early fatalities attributed to the flu have been attributed to COVID-19 after post-mortem analysis. Dr. Redfield does not identify their dates or locations. March 12, 2020, Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesman Zhao Lijian says the United States lacks transparency. When did patient zero begin in the U.S.? How many people are infected? What are the names of the hospitals? It might be the U.S. Army who brought the epidemic to Wuhan. Be transparent. Make public your data. The U.S. owes us an explanation. End of quote. March 13th, 2020. Quote, if I get COVID, I'm going to China, said Dr. Bruce Aylward, the WHO's Assistant Director General and head of the agency's COVID-19 mission. Continuing the quote, they know how to keep people alive. What I saw was a tremendous sense of responsibility and of duty to protect their families, their communities, and even the world from this disease, reflected Aylward. He continued, I left with such a deep sense of admiration for the people of Wuhan and for Chinese society in general. March 18th, 2020, Secretary of State Mike Pompeo vows to increase crushing sanctions on Iran, though it is already preventing the country from purchasing vital medicine and ventilators. In Venezuela, meanwhile, the U.S. sanctions have increased the cost of a coronavirus test to 3 times more than in non-sanctioned countries. That'll show them. March 19th, 2020, China declares victory over coronavirus. The U.S. achieved a milestone of its own. It boasted the sharpest increase in deaths and newest infections per day of any country in the world. Same day, March 19th, the United States announces that, well, that's a repeat, sorry. March 19th, 2020, U.S. doctors run out of N95 masks. March 19th, 2020, a bipartisan group of 130 lawmakers write the Pentagon demanding 98 new F-35 stealth fighters at a cost of $94 million each. That'll get rid of coronavirus. March 20th, 2020, U.S. State Department cables all officials. The cable said, NSC top lines, PRC, that means the People's Republic of China, propaganda and disinformation on the Wuhan virus pandemic. Chinese Communist Party officials in Wuhan and Beijing had a special responsibility to inform the Chinese people and the world of the threat, since they were the first to learn of it. Instead, the government hid news of the virus from its own people for weeks while suppressing information and punishing doctors and journalists who raised the alarm. The party cared more about its reputation than its own people suffering. These talking points are all anyone is really talking about right now, one official said. Everything is about China. We've been told to try and get this messaging out in any way possible, including press conferences and television appearances. End of quote. March 24th, 2020, 3/4 of China's workforce was back on the job. March 27th, 2020, the U.S. military stops providing some of the more granular data about coronavirus infections within its ranks, citing concern that the information might be used by adversaries as the virus spreads. March 27th, 2020, China's Purchasing Managers Index, the PMI, rose to 52. Above 50, above the threshold of 50 signifies expansion. March 30th, 2020, the U.S. Defense Department orders commanders at all of its installations worldwide to stop announcing publicly new coronavirus cases among its personnel, as more than 1,000 U.S. military-linked people had been sickened by the virus. Today, April 2nd, 2020, the U.S. has the most COVID-19 infections of any country around the world. This is Jeff J. Brown, China Rising Radio Sinoland, signing out. Bye-bye.